Did we just go to war with Iran for Israel? Was Kristi Noem fired? Is James Talarico both a devout Christian and a registered Democrat? Tonight, we're going to answer these questions and discuss all the latest news. I'm Ben Corriveau, and welcome to my show. Start off with, obviously, the big news of the week was the U.S. and Israel conducted joint strikes on Iran. Like I said last week, I was kind of expecting it, but it did actually boil over because the deadline was passed and Trump decided that this was something that we needed to do. So first, I do want to honor the people who have died thus far in the conflict. So we have Captain Cody A. Cork, Sergeant First Class Noah L. Tietjens, Sergeant First Class Nicole M. Amore, Sergeant First Class Declan J. Cody, Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, and Chief Warrant Officer Robert M. Marzin. I would like to thank you for your service and thank your families. I can't imagine what they're going through, so I will be praying for all of their souls because it's truly sad that we had to have 6 people die in this operation. But that's how these things go. Sometimes people die. It's always sad, but sometimes they happen, especially when it comes to armed conflict like this. So obviously, a lot of people going back and forth about what this war was for, whether it was justified. So first, I do want to go over to Steve Witkoff, his clip on Hannity. So let's play that quick, just so we can get a brief overview of what was going on in the negotiations that may have precipitated this.
Known you for a long time, and you are a friend. And when you made the statement that, in fact, they may be a week away from possibly having capability, at that moment, I interpreted that to mean it's go time, it's over. Was I wrong? Was that the moment that it was over?
Well, I don't know if that exact moment it was over, but I know this. They have 10,000, roughly, kilograms of fissionable material. That's broken up into roughly 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, another 1,000 kilograms of 20% enriched uranium, and the balance is at 3.67. They manufacture their own centrifuges to enrich this material. So there's almost no stopping them. They have an endless supply of it. The 60% material, Sean, can be brought to 90%. That's weapons grade, in roughly 1 week, maybe 10 days at the outside. The 20% can be brought to weapons grade inside of 3 to 4 weeks. And let me say this, because I forgot this small little detail. In that first meeting, both the Iranian negotiators said to us directly, with no shame, that they controlled 460 kilograms of 60%, and they're aware that that could make 11 nuclear bombs, and that was the beginning of their negotiating stance.
Okay, so as you saw in that clip, they basically said that they had a lot of nuclear material, fissile material, I should say, that they could enrich to become fully enriched for nuclear grade weapons, which obviously is a problem. But if you remember last year, let me just get the date, I believe it was June 25th, 2025, we had Operation Midnight Hammer, which struck the Fordo nuclear site in Iran and reportedly knocked out their nuclear program. So a lot of people have been saying that the government lied to us about this. And at first glance, it does seem like that because obviously they said that this was a huge success, that we completely obliterated their nuclear program. But if you actually look into it, a few days prior to the actual attack on Fordo, there were a lot of shipments being made out of the plant, which at the time was suspected to be nuclear materials that had previously been enriched to approximately 60%. So that does line up with the claims that were being made here by the Iranian negotiators, that they had 460 kilograms of 60% enriched nuclear material. It does seem like this was the case. So why didn't we hear about this? Well, if you were paying attention, you could have assume that. Not only did we have these aerial surveillance, although our government didn't really tell us much about it, which I believe that they should have. They didn't, but they definitely should have. But Hegseth repeatedly said that he was not aware of any intelligence that Iran moved the enriched uranium before the strikes. So to me, this kind of indicates that we didn't know that the nuclear material was in there. We may have destroyed their infrastructure for enriching it, but as they had built that all themselves, it's fairly easy for them to rebuild it. It may take time, but they know how to do it. So I like I said, I think that they should have told us about it just so we were aware of the potential risk that we faced from Iran. I definitely think that would have helped in building general support for the conflict that we're in right now. But they didn't. There's not really much you can do about it now, aside from just policy-wise. But so far, it's seeming like it's going well. I mean, like I said, we thus far only have 6 casualties on our side, which any American death, any death, period, regardless of where you're from, is sad. But it's particularly sad if it's an American death. We're Americans, and obviously I care about what happens to the American people. I don't want us getting dragged into a huge war where we're sending people over just like we did with Iraq and Afghanistan. So I'll be monitoring the situation, and obviously my opinion on this will change. Right now, I don't really have an opinion. I mean, it's happening. If it goes too long, then I'm going to be against it. But thus far, I'm okay with him doing it. So we'll see. But like I said, thus far it's been pretty successful. We did kill the leader of Iran, the Ayatollah Khamenei. So he's been in power since 1989, taking over from Khomeini. Sorry, the names are very similar. I'm not very fluent in the Middle Eastern dialect, so it is kind of difficult for me to pronounce them, but they are 2 different people. And so he was actually pretty ruthless. There's not much to say about him aside from that. But killing him basically meant that we accomplished at least part of what we set out to do. I know that right now the Trump administration is primarily saying that this whole operation is to eliminate their military capabilities, which I do completely agree with. I think that that's very beneficial to us as a nation, as they're one of our greatest enemies in the world right now. But at the same time, they did also, in the initial announcements, call for the protesters in Iran to take over their government and rebuild it. So that portion of it seems to be accomplished with this, at least to some extent, because obviously they no longer have the face of the old regime, even though they are trying to maintain it right now. I believe that they're attempting to put Khamenei's son in as the new supreme leader, but we'll see how that happens. I hear that they're currently trying to seek an end to these strikes, but we'll see. Like I said, this is a constantly changing situation, so as updates come in, you'll see me putting stuff up about what's going on. But one thing that I did find interesting about this is that not everybody was as pro the Ayatollah, as in favor of the Ayatollah as the Washington Post, who in their obituary for Ayatollah Khamenei, they had this quote: "With his bushy white beard and easy smile, Ayatollah Khamenei cut a more avuncular figure in public than his perpetually scowling but much more revered mentor. And he was known to be fond of Persian poetry and classic Western novels, especially Victor Hugo's Les Miserables." Okay, so probably one of the worst leaders in the world in terms of how bad his policies were, especially towards Americans and Israelis, I guess. But I'm an American first. I personally care more about America than I do about Israel, but that's how it goes. So, I mean, it's just crazy to me that they're being so nice to somebody like that. I mean, and one thing I do want to say is that I personally disagree with a lot of the people celebrating his death, and that's just because I don't believe we should be celebrating anybody's death, period. you can celebrate the effects that come about. Like, for example, with Hitler killing himself, that obviously had positive impacts on the world as the Nazi regime fell apart, and it basically destroyed that whole movement for the time, at least based on what we're seeing now in some corners of the internet. But it largely destroyed the movement, and that saved a lot of lives, particularly Jewish and minority lives across the world. So that was a good thing. But despite that, I mean, you have to realize that this is still a human person, a human being. They have families, so it's just not right to celebrate anybody's death, even if you dislike them. So I mean, I'll be praying for him, but I personally don't know if there's much that my prayers can do to help him. But there's that. In the aftermath, similar to what the Washington Post put up, Columbia University, they had an anti-Israel group there come out and put out a ex-post saying Marg Bar Amrika, which is Persian for death to America. And this is coming from one of our elite institutions in the West that's saying that death to America, the very country that is giving them the opportunity to have such a good education and the ability to say stuff like that without being killed in the streets by insane people who are so religious that if you are not Muslim or Islamic, you cannot live there. So I hate saying this, it's pretty privileged for them to say stuff like that, but yeah, it's just crazy that people are willing to say that kind of stuff in the country that gives them so many rights and allows them to say the very things that undermine those rights. But there was that. In addition, we also may be seeing a world war. I highly doubt it at this point because it's been a few days. But a few days ago, intelligence suggests that Iran fired a missile at Turkey. A missile did land near, or it was intercepted by NATO in Turkey airspace. Like I said, Iran is denying it. I don't see why they wouldn't deny it because Article 5 of NATO indicates that if one nation in NATO is attacked, then all the other nations would join in on the side of the nation that was attacked. So very close to entering World War III. Like I said, thus far, I don't believe that's going to be happening because it's been 2 to 3 days. So nothing else has come out about that lately, but that's definitely something interesting that we will need to be watching out for because Iran's kind of been just firing missiles everywhere. I mean, I know they hit Qatar. Did they hit Qatar? I don't believe so. I know that they hit the UAE. That was like their first target, which was so stupid of them. I mean, you have in terms of their military tactics, most of the Middle East was not necessarily pro Iran, but they were at least on relatively good terms, like neutral to good terms with them. So I don't really get why they decided to just start shooting everybody because it just doomed them from the beginning. I mean, so we'll see how long this lasts. I know Trump said that he wants us to be about a 4 to 5 week operation. I would like to see it around that range. I'll give him a little bit of grace. So if something were to happen, let's say up until about 8 weeks, then I'd start questioning it. But I do believe that 4 to 8 weeks is a good timeline for an operation of this sort. But I don't want boots on the ground. And one of my biggest concerns is I don't want to get bogged down in a quagmire. I don't want to get stuck there for years. And I don't want to be unprepared for what comes because I wouldn't be surprised if a worse regime takes control in Iran and we have to deal with it. But I don't want us in there because that's just going to cause so many more problems than what we've already done. So that's my position on it. It'll change if more information comes out that changes my mind, but thus far that's my opinion on it. But one thing that is actually quite interesting about this is a lot of people have been talking about the War Powers Resolution in 1973, which is what allows Trump to do this operation. So it allows the president to conduct military operations for, I believe it's 60 days without the approval of Congress, after which the president can unilaterally extend it to 90 days without Congress's approval. So that is something that is on the books. It's been on the books for a while. And actually, if you look back, this has been used fairly recently. I mean, first of all, it's been used for every major military conflict. Actually, I won't say that this in particular has been used for every major military conflict, but there has not been a declaration of war in any military conflict since World War II. So the presidential branch has been, or the executive branch has been using certain powers that I don't believe they should be allowed to use, but the law does allow them to use it currently. So I wouldn't be opposed to this being repealed by Congress, but right now it's the law, so we're operating under that situation. But one of the most recent, or one of the biggest examples of this was in 2011 with Obama's Libya strike. So these began in mid-March of 2011, and they lasted, I believe it was March 19th to March 30th. These strikes were going on in Libya, after which, March 31st, NATO took over the operations, which, surprise, surprise, the United States is probably one of the biggest stakeholders in NATO. We're probably the country in NATO, the biggest one. And so then NATO took over until late October 2011. So this was authorized under the War Powers Act of 1973. And as you saw, that's, 7 months? So 7 months of military conflict. Because like I said, I hesitate to call it a war since technically it's not being declared, but that was allowed. And actually Nancy Pelosi's getting some heat about this because she defended Obama's ability to do that without any Congress interaction or Congress approval. But she's now saying that Trump needs congressional approval for his operations, which it's very similar circumstances. I don't really see why one would be correct and one wouldn't be, but it's Nancy Pelosi for you, another partisan. But so there was that. Then we also had Biden. He used the same the same War Powers Act to attack the Houthis. So he ordered strikes on the Houthis in Yemen. These lasted from January of 2024 through December of 2024. So once again, this is a 1-year period of military action without a formal declaration of war. And technically, both of these are in violation of the War Powers Act, but nobody said anything. So it's not, it is precedent at this point. Like I said, I don't think it should be, but it is. So we just kind of have to deal with that. And that's kind of the whole criticism from the Democrats, is that this was either unconstitutional or that Trump shouldn't have done it because there wasn't, because we should be diplomatic with Iran. Like they have a whole bunch of different reasons why, but I'm more concerned about the people in the conservative movement who are trying to undermine the current administration and the MAGA agenda going forward. Because, and these people are everywhere. I'm sure you see them. I'm not going to name them because I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. But, I mean, like, one of the biggest things that they're saying is that Trump betrayed his voters. This is absolutely ridiculous. These people either, one, have not paid attention to anything that Trump has done or said since at least 2015. And I say that for a reason. But so they haven't done that. They are so anti-Israel that they would rather see America's interest. Basically, they would rather see that America doesn't attain its interests if those interests coincide with Israel's interests, which is ridiculous because you can't claim to be America first and then say, I'm America first, except for when this country benefits when we also benefit. So that's ridiculous. And then the third one is that they're just a grifter. They're just trying for attention. And that's, I do think that a lot of people are in that camp. The anti-Israel group, some of them are in that camp as well, but I would say that they are distinct. But I mean, We can look. So back in 1980, Trump had an interview about the strikes on Iran, saying that he wasn't very happy with how the operations went in Iran. This is talking about the Tehran Iran hostage crisis from 1979. I believe it was 400 something days that this crisis lasted, and yeah, he said that he wasn't very happy about it. He wanted boots on the ground for that. And this is in 1980 that he said that. So way before any idea that he was going to be running for president. There was that. Then in 2004, he criticized George Bush for his actions in Afghanistan, getting us into the war over there, the war on terror, if you don't know. But he said that he wasn't happy with how it was being handled. We were sending over too many people, and too many people were dying over there with no clear end goal. So he's had a track record of saying that, yes, he is against prolonged conflict, but he is also in favor of decisive action that would solve, or that would end the problems that he's perceiving. Now, even in 2015, Trump opened up his campaign saying, quote unquote, "I would bomb the bleep out of ISIS." So that doesn't sound like an isolationist or anything. That sounds like what his policy is right now. He's going to use military force to achieve his goals. If they're killing Americans or they're anti-American, he is going to use the military in a limited capacity to remove the threat. I mean, so there was that. You could see he was interested in Middle Eastern affairs because during his first term, he passed the Abraham Accords in 2017, which basically set the framework for better Middle Eastern relations across the region. There was that. I mean, he also ordered the strike on Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, as well as Qasem Soleimani. Both of these occurred in 2020. Both of these were military actions to take out foreign leaders, or not necessarily foreign leaders, but leaders of terrorist organizations that had ties to, at least Qasem Soleimani had ties to the Iranian government. So there was that. Then we had in 2025, we had the strikes on Fordo, the 3 nuclear strikes in Iran. I mean, that was another major military action in the Middle East. Then, I mean, they even published a whole list of all the times that he said that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. All of these going back, I think the earliest one is, let's see, 2019. Oh, 2011, he's even said it. So this has been going on for at least a decade and a half. Trump has been saying that Iran can't get a nuclear weapon. Then we have 2026, we have the capture of Maduro, another major military operation that the goal was, I'm not going to say exactly similar. It's not a one-to-one relationship to this operation in Iran, but it is fairly similar in the end goal. We want some sort of regime change, and we want the end of their military program that would make them a threat to us. So shows that he is willing to go out and do this stuff, and that didn't turn into a war. I am still cautious about what's going to happen with the government over there. I'm fairly confident that we're going to stay with the current regime at least until another election is held. But we'll see. I obviously can't predict the future, but we'll see what's going on with that. But I mean, it's just over and over again that we've heard that he wants limited action to achieve America's goals. I mean, I don't think he could be any clearer that this has been his policy for decades. But you have these grifters online saying that Trump betrayed his voters because he said that he didn't want any more stupid wars, which I don't think that these are stupid wars. I think that the Venezuela one, I think it was very successful. I don't necessarily know if it was as necessary as was promoted of it, but they did basically steal our oil because we literally went over there, we built the supplies for them, and then they nationalized it and didn't give us back anything that we paid for and built over there. That was just lost. So that was definitely good. Obviously, they were working with certain other countries such as China, and I believe they were also working with Iran to transport oil around our sanctions. So I could see why we would go in, but like I said, I don't necessarily think that was well portrayed to the American people prior to the attack, prior to the abduction of Maduro. So there was that. I mean, it's just over and over again, he has shown that this is what his policy is, and these people just want you to be anti-Trump, and they're looking for you to abandon the MAGA movement and go for whatever they want, whether that's a Groyper, like the Nick Fuentes types, or whatever. Establishment Republicans is another big one that's starting to form up again. And these people, we don't want back in power. I'm sure that you all remember what it was like with the Mitt Romney types. I mean, nothing against them, but they aren't necessarily America first. They aren't what Trump stands for. I mean, he's by far one of the better presidents that in history, I would say, by far the best president of my lifetime. Because Biden was definitely the worst, and I would say that between Bush and Obama, it's fairly even. They both had their mistakes. So it's certainly debatable, but I would say that Trump is definitely the best president of my lifetime. So it's just ridiculous that these people are going after these attacks. But I mean, let's go through some of the other claims that they're making to disprove those. So this response was completely unwarranted because they were trying to get a nuclear weapon. I mean, that's ridiculous. But first, I mean, we can see 1979, the original Shah of Iran fled the country because he was being targeted by these rebels that eventually took over and became the supreme leader, Khomeini. Like I said, I'm not very good with the pronunciations here, but Khomeini, the original supreme leader, he took over from the Shah after basically making him flee for threat of his life from the country because he was pro-West. He was basically the Western bastion in the Middle East at the time. So they were already against the West at their inception. Then we had the Iran hostage crisis, which lasted for around 444 days. Again, this is a direct attack against Americans. I mean, you can see we have the Iran sanctions. These began in 1979. So we've been sanctioning them since 1979, and nothing has changed. 1984, they were listed as the largest state sponsor, or one of the state sponsors of terrorism. Again, all of these things are justifications for why we went in, because we've done all these actions and nothing has come out of it. It's all ended the same. They're still attacking us. They're still saying death to America. It needs to stop. I mean, we can even go through 2002, George W. Bush, Iraq, Iran, and North Korea as axis of evil. 2004, Iran supported groups in the Middle East, 2024. I'm sorry, it's a bit late and I can't really read this. 2024, all the supported groups, all the groups that Iran supports in the Middle East. So we have the Lebanese Hezbollah, we have Hamas, the Houthis, the Iraqi militias. All these are terrorist organizations that literally target civilians to achieve their political goals, which is furthering Islamist religion across the country, across the globe, really. So, I mean, it's pretty clear that they've been fighting against us for such a long time, and they've even gone to some of our enemies. I mean, here from Bloomberg, clandestine oil shipping hub funneling Iranian crude to China, because I believe it's about 20% of the oil that China uses comes from Iran. So they're funding our enemies. They're shouting death to America. They want us gone. I mean, all this is going on. And we even tried diplomacy. We've been having negotiations for a while. We obviously had the Fordo nuclear site strike last year because they wouldn't agree to any of our negotiations. Then Trump gave them an ultimatum. You have 10 to 15 days to reach an agreement where you'll promise that you won't ever develop a nuclear weapon. And they wouldn't do it. So Trump did the natural next step, and he just went in and started strikes on them. So that's obviously insane. And then more of the anti-Israel crowd is saying, the only reason we joined this war is because of Israel. And that's it's so ridiculous. I already went through literally all of the background behind all of the things that Iran has done to us throughout their history and why we needed to go in, as well as the reason that Trump has been advocating for this policy for decades. So all of this is pretty clear, but they're still saying that this is only because of Israel. So let's actually take a look at these claims, because I know that there is one clip in particular that everybody's pointing to, which is the Marco Rubio clip, where he is talking about basically the idea is that Israel wanted to strike Iran, and therefore we decided to strike Iran first. So this clip is going around. I'll put it up right now so you can watch it.
The second question that's been asked is, why now? Well, there's two reasons why now. The first is it was abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond against the United States. The orders had been delegated down to the field commanders. It was automatic, and in fact, it bared to be true, because in fact, within an hour of the initial attack on the leadership compound, the missile forces in the south and in the north, for that matter, had already been activated to launch. In fact, those had already been pre-positioned. The third is the assessment that was made that if we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
Okay, so that obviously looks pretty bad. I mean, he's basically saying that we struck Iran preemptively because Israel was going to strike them, and we were worried that we were going to get caught in the crossfire. So even that, I do think, is loosely leaning towards their side, because obviously it's not in our interest to be attacked when we know that we're going to be attacked. So, I mean, there's that. But if you want to say that we're being are basically led by Israel because Israel wanted to attack them first, I mean, you can go ahead and say that. But let's watch this other clip too, which kind of disproves that whole thing.
The U.S. was forced to strike because of an impending Israeli action?
No, first of all, two things I would say. Number one is, no matter what, ultimately this operation needed to happen. That's the question of why now. But this operation needed to happen because Iran in about a year or a year and a half would cross the line of immunity, meaning they would have so many short-range missiles, so many drones, that no one could do anything about it because they could hold the whole world hostage. Look at the damage they're doing now. And this is a weakened Iran. Imagine a year from now. So that had to happen. Obviously, we were aware of Israeli intentions and understood what that would mean for us, and we had to be prepared to act as a result of it. But this had to happen no matter what.
So in this second clip, you can pretty clearly see that we're not, this was a planned operation. We've been planning this for a while. It was going to happen. And while the Israeli strikes on Iran may have sped up the timetables of it, it never actually forced our hand, because we were already planning on doing this at some point in the future anyways. It's just absolutely ludicrous. And I mean, I'll even pull up Trump's clip about this.
Mr. President, did Israel force your hand to launch these strikes against Iran? Did Netanyahu pull the United States into this war?
No, I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack. If we didn't do it, they were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that. And we have great negotiators, great people that do this very successfully and have done it all their lives very successful. And based on the way the negotiation was going, I think they were going to attack first. And I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand.
So, I mean, you could see, the administration is very, very clear that this was something that we were planning on doing, and it just happened that Israel was planning an attack. We knew that this was going to cause problems for us because our intelligence indicated that Iran was going to strike us back regardless of who attacked them in the first place. So we decided, instead of getting punched first and get knocked out, we wanted to be the first one to punch, and punch a lot harder than they could. So that's pretty much the whole Iran situation. That's what I've got there. I mean, I'm really sick of these people who pretend to be Trump supporters, and then anytime that something goes wrong, all of a sudden they're 100% anti-Trump. Oh, I'm never going to vote for Trump again. These people are manipulative, and they are doing their best to make a name for themselves without any they have no evidence behind their claims. They have no backbone whatsoever, because they won't come out and say that they're anti-Trump. Because at least I will give the leftists and the liberals who hate Trump credit, because they're actually open about it. These people will pretend to like Trump, and then say, "Oh no, I can't stand for him because I mean, just here, I can't stand for him because he's bringing us into war with on Israel's behalf." I mean, there's literally, I just showed you all the evidence that we have for going to, not even war. I mean, it's a conflict right now. Potentially it may become a war, but I'm not going to call it a war until it is a war. But that's just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the only major response on American soil that we have seen is a Austin bar shooting that was potentially linked to these Iran strikes, which obviously this was a horrible event. There were 13 people wounded and 3 dead as of Monday. But it seems like this was motivated by the Iran strikes, as the perpetrator had a sweatshirt on labeled "Property of Allah." He was wearing a shirt that seemed to, it appeared to be the Iranian flag. He had a couple copies of a Quran in his car, and I believe he also had pictures of several, I'm just trying to find the quote quick. Yeah, so he had photos of several Iranian leaders in his home as well. So there's no official announcement as to what the motive was. It seems like it was either a religious radicalism in terms of Muslim or the Islam. I'm sorry, I'm having so much trouble speaking tonight. Islamic radicalism, or it was related to the Iran strikes, but we don't know. That happened last weekend, so I'm hoping that in the coming weeks we'll have more information on that. But like I said, nothing yet, so I don't want to go too far into that. But it's just crazy to me that we can allow this sort of stuff to happen and still have Democrats fighting to defund DHS. I mean, they literally won't vote for the funding package for DHS, and obviously that's a big thing for me, because their claim is that they want to reform ICE and CBP, Customs and Border Patrol. Problem with that is that ICE and I believe CBP as well, they're both funded through 2029. So there's not really any benefit to holding up DHS funds, particularly because these are the organizations that help us in our day-to-day life. Like there's TSA, Coast Guard, I believe, was one. I went through the list last week or 2 weeks ago, I don't remember. But you can go look at my video on that. I mean, this has bigger impacts than they're going on. But this week we also had the DHS Oversight Hearings, which Kristi Noem was obviously subject to, and that was quite big news this week, because there were 2 big moments in these hearings that kind of sealed her fate, if you know what I'm talking about, because obviously she has been moved to the position of Special Envoy for the Shield of the Americas. A lot of people are saying that she was fired for this. I find it difficult to say that you are being fired if you are moved into a different position in the same organization. I mean, that's what if you want to call it a demotion, call it a demotion. I don't particularly care, but this wasn't a firing. Yes, it was on potentially bad terms, based on what I'll say right now, because during these hearings, it came out that she funded a $220 million ad campaign, which prominently featured her and reportedly focused on, it basically funded her former ad campaign for when she was, I forget what position she was in prior, but she was in South Dakota. And it was definitely suspicious. And she claimed that Trump approved it, which Trump apparently did not. And he didn't take too kindly to that. So that's one of the reasons why it sounds like Trump may have moved her from the head of DHS. But there was also another clip where a Democrat, I'm just trying to pull up the name so I give her credit. Where is it? Yeah, so it was Representative Sydney Kamlager Dove. She's a Democrat from California. She questioned Noam about whether or not she was sleeping with one of her. Basically, she was the superior of somebody who she was sleeping with. That was the allegation, and there have been rumors about that. I'm not going to get into basically gossip or anything like that. I don't know if it's true. It may be. It may not be. I don't know. But I personally think that if it's true, then that's another reason why she could have potentially been removed from her position or moved to another position because, I mean, let's be real. She has had several PR disasters, particularly in regards to the 2 shootings in Minneapolis, because, and I've been critical of this myself. I do think that both shootings were justified. However, the Trump administration over-exaggerated the threats posed by both of them, both Renee Good and Alex Preddy, because I mean, with Renee Good, it's hard to tell intent. It seems like she was trying to drive away, and she didn't care that the officer was there. It wasn't like she was intentionally trying to kill the officer when she ran into him, but that is a legal use of force. And then with Alex Preddy, it's obviously he wasn't. Well, he may have been trying to kill them. The only reason I doubt that is because if you're carrying a firearm and somebody disarms you, it is natural for you to reach behind you or wherever your holster is to attempt to feel for it to make sure it's still there. And if you feel it gone, it's a natural reflex. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's what happened while he was on the ground. He was resisting arrest, but he was on the ground, reached for it. Even though it wasn't there, not all the officers could have known that in the moment. So I do think that both were legally justified. If you want to question the morals of it, go right ahead. I don't particularly care. I'm more focused on the legality of it because we all have different morals. Certain morals are significantly better than others, and there should be objective morality. That's why I'm a Catholic, and we need objective morals to have a good society. But I'm more, in this instance, worried about the legality of it as opposed to the moral questions, because we can always go on and on about whether it was moral or not. We can have all those debates, but in the end, all that matters is whether it was legal. So there was that. She's out as Secretary of DHS. She's now being replaced by Markwayne Mullin. So I don't know too much about him. I've heard good things. I do know that he used to be he used to do MMA a lot, so I'm sure he'll get a lot of respect from the people out there on the streets, because obviously he knows what it's like to be in like fistfights and stuff like that. So we'll see how that goes. So far I'm pretty excited, but I got to do some more reading on him just to see if he's aligning with what I want out of the department. But so far I think it's good. We also had a few Supreme Court cases come out this week. One of the big ones was Urias Orellana versus Bondi. In this case, it basically said that the Trump administration was doing the right thing with their deportations, because all federal courts must defer to immigration agencies when deciding whether facts qualify as persecution when in regards to asylum cases. So what that means is that you can't just come into the country illegally and claim asylum and not have a reason to claim asylum. Like you can't say, oh, I don't want to live in France, so therefore I'm coming into America illegally and I'm claiming asylum. You have to demonstrate that there is a clear and present danger to yourself in your country of origin or certain other countries that would require you to seek asylum. So that was a great decision. We also had Mirabelli v. Bonta, which is another huge decision. It basically said that schools cannot socially transition kids and not inform their parents of it because that was happening. Like, how ridiculous is that? And you have Democrats defending this, that you could send your kid to school and their teacher can say, "Oh, I think that you're gay or you're transgender," and they convince the kid to go along with it, and then they tell their class to support them and everything. This is ridiculous. That's not the school's at all. That's the parents' business. It's just ridiculous. So we had that case. We also had Clinton testimony. I mean, there was not too much that came out of this. I know it's not Supreme Court, but it was fairly big. Like I said last week, I would cover what came out of it. Nothing much. I mean, it was pretty much just what I said last week. Very little new information came out, but we had all that. I mean, Bill Clinton, there's nothing that I saw. Basically, overall, it was just, oh, I've never seen him. I never knew him. That was, I never saw him was mostly Hillary, and then Bill Clinton, I never knew, and if I had known, I wouldn't have done any other stuff. I mean, we know that they have gotten away with a lot in the past, particularly in regards to the Monica Lewinsky case, where he literally lied to Congress about that. But, I mean, it's kind of hard to say anything legally about that, like in regards to whether he could legally be held accountable for anything. But I mean, we'll see. Like I said, I highly doubt it. Nothing really big came out of it. Probably the biggest thing was that the Hillary Clinton freak out over Benny Johnson's post, but that was last week. So I mean, nothing really new about that. Another big one was the Tim Walz Oversight Hearing this week, which was obviously about fraud, where it was the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. They held a hearing with Tim Walz there, as well as Attorney General Keith Ellison of Minnesota. And they found that both of them lied about knowing whether... Basically, they knew that there was fraud existing in their government, whether that be in terms of their federal funding or whatever it was, how they were distributing the funds. They knew that there was fraud there. And instead of attempting to resolve the problem and eliminate the fraud, they chose to silence anybody who attempted to call out the fraud by calling them racist, sexist, whatever, basically any name in the book that you could. They did that in order to try to silence them. Luckily, it didn't end up working, and we now know that the scale of the fraud in Minnesota. I'm just hoping that people actually start getting held accountable for it. And the first two need to be Tim Walz and Keith Ellison, because they're the ones who allowed this to happen. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, nothing too much there aside from the fact that we know that they lied. I mean, another big thing, this was actually huge, was the Texas primaries, because obviously last week we talked a lot about leftist violence as well as the game plan for 2026 and 2028, the elections, because Democrats obviously want to win. They hate Trump. They want to win these elections, and their radicalism isn't playing well with moderates or a lot of the Democrat Party right now. So, in this instance, they chose to run James Talarico against Jasmine Crockett. And James Talarico, he's a Presbyterian pastor. He pretends to be a Christian, and I'll tell you why he pretends, because he is by far one of the worst heretics that I have ever seen. Let me play this supercut of Talarico giving his religious advice.
Undocumented immigrants?
No, I do not.
When I was a teacher on the west side of San Antonio, I taught a lot of students who were undocumented. And I don't want to stereotype, but those students tended to be the most patriotic, the hardest working students that I had in the classroom. And again, I haven't stated this enough to say this definitively, but there are interpretations of certain passages from the Torah where some folks will even say that there is some subtle instructions for how to perform an abortion in the ancient world, certain things to drink, things like that. Before we go further, I want to acknowledge that our trans community needs abortion care too. Defending trans Texans is something we have to do every day at the state capitol. And you better believe I'll be giving sermons on that too. I want us all to be aware of is that modern science obviously recognizes that there are many more than two biological sexes. In fact, there are 6. Is both masculine and feminine and everything in between. God is non-binary.
Okay, so as you can see in this clip, he, one, thinks illegal immigrants are more patriotic than Americans, which I guess that's not religious, that's fine. If you want to dock that against me, dock it against me. Second, he thinks that the Old Testament actually tells you how to give people abortions, which is absurd. I mean, there's that. Oh, yeah, this is one of my favorite, or these two clips in a row are my favorite clips of him. Transgender people need abortions too. So women that think that they're men need access to abortion, which is, that's so anti-Christian in the first place. I mean, the abortion claim has been, like, the church has been against that for centuries. The transgender thing is genuinely that is completely against Christian teaching, because Christian teaching, and I publicly say this quite often, every person is made in the image and likeness of God, and they are perfect the way that they are. That includes people who mistakenly believe that they are a man or a woman when they are not. But going ahead and saying that they need to change their physical attributes by getting these crazy surgeries, these radical surgeries, inherently implies that God made a mistake with them, and they are the ones who truly know what's right for them. And that's not true. It's truly sad to see these people that believe that something is wrong with them and they need to change it. Like, I really hope that every single one of them is able to recognize that they are perfect who they are. I mean, it's just sad. But so that there was that clip. There was also a clip where he says that science proves that there are 6 genders, 6 sexes, which is crazy to me because all the science I've seen says that there's 2, and I guess you may be able to make an argument for a third if you're talking about intersex, but even then, that's not a third sex. That's just a mutation in your genomes that causes you to have both genitals on you. So I mean, it's not a third sex. It's just, like I said, a mutation. Just like anybody who has, like, for example, autism, potentially. I don't know if there's an autism gene or if that's been found. Down syndrome is probably a better example there, where it's a genetic mutation. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just not, it doesn't make you a different being because you are. So, yeah, he's extremely radical, especially this last one. Like, God is neither man nor woman. He is masculine and feminine. He is non-binary. I mean, God literally became man in the form of Jesus Christ, which was a man. So yeah, he is a he. I mean, it's just crazy. And one thing that I want you to keep in mind with all this is Matthew chapter 7, verses 15 through 17. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorns or figs from thistles? In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. This is so important to recognize here, because Talarico is openly, he's basically trying to mold Christianity to fit his leftist ideals, which it doesn't, because leftism is inherently opposed to tradition and, in particular, Christianity. If you want to go back all the way to the French Revolution, where the terms left and right came from, they were against the Catholic Church. I mean, this is what they've been trying to do for years, and now he's perverting. I even hesitate to say perverting, because it's more of an inversion than a perversion of Christian teaching. And it's just sad because people are actually falling for it. And I do think that they need to recognize that this isn't this isn't Christianity. This is more satanic than anything, because he is deliberately misrepresenting everything that Jesus Christ stood for and died for by claiming that it's actually not what everybody that throughout all history or throughout most of Christian history has known to be true is suddenly false because he says so. I mean, it's just ludicrous, and it's very sad to see that this is the low that the Democrats are going to now, just to win votes. I mean, it's truly evil. And I mean, we've seen this before. I mean, I talked about it on, I believe it was my first episode with the Stephen Colbert interview, where they both of them lied about it, saying that Trump shut down the interview when Stephen Colbert just didn't want to have Jasmine Crockett on air, which, okay, fine. I mean, I would have liked Jasmine Crockett to have gone on air, and I actually wanted her to win her primary. I would have preferred her over Talarico, because she was, even though she was probably more vocally radical, I think that she's much more honest about what she's doing, and she's not going around and perverting Christ's teachings to fit her worldview without evidence. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But speaking of Jasmine Crockett, so she lost, like I said, and she blamed Republicans for it, which is funny because a primary is for Democrat voters. A Democrat primary is where Democrats come to vote. So I hate to break it to her, but yeah, it was your own party who, I won't say necessarily cheated, but they definitely lied their way to the top, because like I said, they literally made sure that she didn't get equal time to Talarico. It's just ridiculous. I mean, this is what the Democrat Party stands for now. It's anti-American, and it's against all the ideals that it claims to stand for, because anytime that it contradicts itself, it just says, no, whoever has the most power wins. And that's what happened here. But on the Republican side, we also had some big changes. So we had Dan Crenshaw. So he's the incumbent. He lost his primary. I believe that it's Toast is his last name. Let me just double check that. I'm not saying, I'll put it up if I can find it. So he lost the primary, so he's no longer going to be a representative for Texas. We also had Brandon Herrera. He was ahead by a few hundred votes. In Texas, that means that you go to a runoff because it was under 50% of the vote. So no candidate won that. So he was facing against Representative Tony Gonzalez, who has quite a few scandals out about him right now. So that probably hampered his turnout. And I mean, I'm fine with it. I love Brandon Herrera. He's by far one of my favorite YouTubers, and I'm glad that he won, because today Tony Gonzalez actually dropped out of the race, as you can see to my right, I believe. It's in the editing, so it's kind of difficult for me to tell. But yeah, Tony Gonzalez dropped out today, so Brandon Herrera is going to be the Republican candidate for representative, or one of the representatives, because there's obviously a few representatives that are in there, but those were the two big ones. We also had the Senate race between John Cornyn and Ken Paxton going on. Neither one received the 50%, so they also are going to a runoff. And that's a bit more strenuous because the Trump administration has reportedly been planning on supporting John Cornyn, but Ken Paxton has come out and said that even if the Trump administration votes for John or endorses John Cornyn, he's not going to drop out of the race, which is a huge mistake, because it's literally either John Cornyn or Ken Paxton against Talarico, and I would significantly prefer a Republican to win that over Talarico. But I mean, that's pretty much it with the Texas primaries. Like I said, it was a big news week, but most of it was on Iran, and it's not something I particularly care about too much. I much prefer talking about the economy and stuff like that, but you don't get to do that every week. So we had that. One thing that is a bit closer to home for me is that February 27th, so this was late last week, Rhode Island introduced a bill. It's HB 8073, and this amends a previous bill, HB 5436, which was passed, I believe, in August of last year. Let me just double check that. So it was proposed in January. I believe it passed in August, and then it goes into effect July of 2026. And this bill essentially bans all semi-automatic firearms in the state. However, it has a grandfather clause. So if you previously had if you have a firearm that is considered prohibited prior to the date that this law goes into effect, you would be grandfathered in. You could keep it. You just had to register it with the state. Now, this was already a bit of a stretch because, I mean, in the Rhode Island Constitution, it's Section 22 of the Rhode Island Constitution, we have the right to keep and bear arms. So that's already a violation there. Legal precedent, it is a violation. I put up a post the other day. I'll put it up here as well so you can see what I said, because it does go into the legal precedent of it. But it's pretty clear that they don't have the power to do this, and they're doing it anyway. But they didn't just stop here. So this new bill, HB 8073, actually eliminates that grandfather clause and makes it illegal to even possess any firearm that is prohibited by this HB 5436. So you basically become a felon overnight if this bill were to be passed, which I know right now there's a few ballot effort or not a few ballot efforts, a few signature efforts to get it revoked, because it's absolutely insane that this bill is being proposed that would literally make you a felon overnight for owning a firearm that has been legal and is still legal under, like, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I get why the Democrats are doing this, because Governor McKee is one of the least popular governors in the country. And it's not looking too good. I wouldn't be surprised if they still win. But I have been seeing a few polls that show that the Democrat Party in Rhode Island is not doing too well. I believe that the first place candidate right now, I know it's not McKee, and I believe she only has about 38% of the vote. So it's on the Democrat side. So it is actually looking pretty good for Republicans. But like I said, we need to put in the work. I highly doubt that it's going to turn out Republican this year, but I would absolutely love it if Rhode Island turned red for this election, because I really do think that people are sick of these failed Democrat policies. And I think that that's why they're trying to push this right now, because if they can get this on the books prior to the election, even if Republicans do win certain elections and they take the legislature, you still need both the legislature and the governorship to actually get this repealed. And I think that that's why they're pushing this now. But yeah, I really do think that this is an absolute abuse of our rights. I'm sorry, a violation of our rights. And it needs to be stopped. So I'm hoping that we can get a lot more gun owners to show up for these elections, because right now we have a lot of gun owners that just don't show up for elections, and this is an important one. I know it's cliche to say that this is the next most important election, but it really is. These next two elections, so I'm actually going to say three. So 2026, 2028, 2030, these are going to define America's future. Because if Republicans can stay in power through 2030, Republicans will almost certainly get a majority, basically, and a majority that will last for the next 10 years when the census is recounted. And this is why Trump really needs to redo the census. I know that he hasn't done that yet, and I'm fairly confident it's because he's focusing on foreign policy over national policy. Whether you like it or not, I believe that's what's happening. But this needs to happen because we need the proper counts, because the 2020 census was messed up. We have the documents that show that it was, and it's looking like in 2030, if the current metrics follow, that Republicans will gain a lot of seats and Democrats will lose a lot of seats, and it's going to be painful for the Democrats. So if Republicans can hold out until then it's going to be pretty hard for Democrats to win. Just like the opposite's true if the Democrats win in 2026, 2028, 2030, which is increasingly likely as Republicans are refusing to do anything in Congress. But that's it for tonight. Like I said, if you like what I do here, I'd love it if you like and subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you next week on the next episode of the Ben Corriveau Show.